Widely circulated recommendations to promote a second Marshall Plan, the third world debt relief, and finance for a stable development.
Nobody at that caucus mentioned a second world Marshall Plan or a new currency system to finance a stable development. The World Conservation Bank had not been thoroughly discussed at all. I was denied the opportunity to openly challenge Rothschild's remarks at the caucus by the World Conservation Bank president and meeting chairman, I. Michael Sweetman. In world politics, the names of First World, Second World, Third World, and Fourth World are used to describe blocks of political entities. The First World is the capitalist countries of Europe and North America. They are industrial and are, therefore, the world's biggest polluters. The Second World is the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries. Do you remember Rothschild referring to a Second World Marshall Plan? He was speaking of the Soviet Bloc countries, not a second Marshall Plan. He was speaking of the Soviet Bloc countries and that they will be rescued by First World money. Europe was granted huge sums of money by the Marshall Plan in 1949, and the Second World will receive billions of North American money in this repeat performance. And guess what banking family will act as the main money changers for the Russian ruble, possibly absconding with billions? The Rothschild Group, of course. Rothschild made these remarks back in 1987, 2 years before the Berlin Wall was torn down. He was bragging to us that he knew the Soviet regime would collapse. Here are some April 1992 news articles about the progress of Rothschild's Second World Marshall Plan. They come from the New York Times, and the world order is right on time. Here is a April 15th, 1992 New York Times headline. $44 billion needed to aid ex-Soviets in 1992, IMF says. It's needed for a shift to the free market. Most of the help would finance imports of food and spare parts for 15 republics. My response to that is, sure. Another article in the international edition of the New York Times, Wednesday, April 29th, 1992, had this to say about Rothschild's Marshall Plan. Although there has been much talk about building a new political order in the post-Cold War world, the events here in the last few days make clear that a new economic order is also rapidly emerging. Washington cannot bankroll a Marshall Plan for the former Soviet republics because the task is so enormous and because the American economy is debt-ridden and no longer so dominant. That is why Washington has asked the IMF to run the rescue operations, which are expected to cost $44 billion this year. Well, Rothschild really called it, didn't he? Soon after these remarks were made, the Rothschilds reopened the Rothschild Bank in Frankfurt, Germany, after 50 years of closure. They are now conveniently available to stabilize the Russian ruble with money from the West. Question: do we really want to send North American money abroad so the Rothschilds can make multi-billion-dollar windfalls on the currency trades? Let's talk about the Third World now. The Third World are those countries who have emerged since World War II. Young and easily fooled, the World Bank played bad tricks on them, spiriting billions of loan dollars back to Swiss bank accounts through fictitious African addresses. They now owe $1.5 trillion to the world banking system with nothing to show for it except poverty and cruel loan collections. Maurice Strong has suggested an ominous scenario at the UNCED meeting, which could break out if his words are to be believed. He says in this article in West magazine that a fight may erupt between the First World polluters and the Third World poor. Here is how he describes it. Each year, he explains as background to the telling of his novel's plot, the World Economic Forum convenes in Davos, Switzerland. Over 1,000 CEOs, prime ministers, finance ministers, and leading academics gather in February to attend meetings and set economic agendas for the year ahead. With this as a setting, Maurice Strong then says, what if a small group of these world leaders were to conclude that the principal risk to the earth comes from the actions of the rich countries? And if the world is to survive, those rich countries would have to sign an agreement reducing their impact on the environment. Will they do it? He's really talking about the UNCED meeting. And Strong, driving as I take notes, looks at me. Then his eyes go back to Highway 17 on the way from Alamosa, Colorado to his New Age ranch in Crestone, Colorado. He says, the man who founded the United Nations Environment Program and who wrote parts of the Brundtland Report and who in 1992 will try to get the world's leaders meeting in Brazil to sign just such an agreement savors the questions hanging in the air. Will they do it? Will the rich countries agree to reduce their impact on the environment? Will they agree to save the earth? Strong resumes his story. The group's conclusion is no. The rich countries won't do it. They won't change. So, in order to save the planet, the group decides, isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring this about? This group of world leaders, he continues, form a secret society to bring about an economic collapse. It's February. They're all at Davos. These aren't terrorists. They're world leaders. They have positioned themselves in the world's commodity and stock markets. They've engineered, using their access to stock exchanges and computers and gold supplies, a panic. Then they prevent the world stock market from closing. They jam the gears. They hire mercenaries who hold the rest of the world leaders at Davos as hostages. The markets can't close. The rich countries, and Strong makes a slight motion with his fingers as if he were flicking a cigarette butt out the window. I sit there spellbound. This is not any storyteller talking. This is Maurice Strong. He knows these world leaders. He is, in fact, co-chairman of the Council of the World Economic Forum. He sits at the fulcrum of power. He is in a position to do it. I probably shouldn't be saying things like this, he says. Highway 17 cuts straight across the desert, heading out of the land of dreams. When the truth is finally told, Maurice Strong fears the world will come to this. No secret societies, no hostage takings at Davos, but it will come to the same conclusion. The global economy, sapped by credit and debt loads and environmental disasters, will simply come unstuck. And nothing, not even the inspiration of the Baka, can save humankind from itself. They see the struggles and problems at the Baka as reflections of the problems assaulting the planet. They fear the Baka will be, at best, an oasis in the desert of the future, and at worst, a place where dreams die. Even if Strong is fictionalizing and imagining, why would he even suggest these things? The point remains, something important is going to happen at the UNCED Earth Summit.